Before you start painting, you need to look at your paints and to see what's going to work the best. What are you going to put on your palette and what brand are you going to put on your palette? Some brands, when you put a thick application of them, are going to crack. And some are going to completely dissipate because they're mostly water. Some are going to be more opaque and they're going to cover. And some of them are going to be basically transparent. Now with yellow, it's the most transparent color, so they're all not going to completely be opaque and cover everything. Now, some colors mix well with other paints and some paints don't mix well with other paints. And so you got to figure those things out as well. The best way of doing this is to going online and asking professionals or typing in and looking for professionals saying, what do you put on your palette and what colors do you use? A limited paint palette, like you see here, is the easiest paint palette to start with because all of those are going to act well with each other. They're all going to play nice. Once you start getting more colors, you can create different things, but not that much different. This person here with just these 5 colors can create almost any color there is. Although there is no true 3 primary colors, you can get pretty close using the right brands with the right colors. This person here is using 10 different colors, and you can see that they've got quite a variety of color. There is no reason, however, to use this many colors. That would complicate things. It's going to dirty up your entire palette. It's going to make your whole palette a mess, and it's going to be hard to control. That's really difficult. It makes it harder when you use more colors, believe it or not. You do need to look at your colors and what you want out of them. You can look at this color wheel here and use the 3 primary colors, yellow, cyan, and magenta. However, those aren't going to create every color and they're not going to do it as well as some colors, but that's a legitimate 3 primary colors. As you can see here we have a primary blue, primary green, and a primary red. That's a different color wheel than most. The most popular color wheel is using a red, yellow, and blue, or you can see here you can use a cool yellow, warm yellow, a warm red and a cool red, a warm blue and a cool blue, and if you want, you can even throw in a warm green and a cool green, although those are not necessary. You would also want to probably throw in something like a burnt umber. We're going to keep it nice and simple, and we're going to use the easiest 3 primary colors, and that's the red, yellow, blue, and it does have its limitations. However, it's going to work just fine for us. Now, which brand are you going to use and which colors are you going to choose? That's the next question. I've already done some playing around with these colors, and I really like phthalo and yellow. It gives us a really nice green. I really like our bright red and our yellow. That's going to give us some nice oranges. And I really like our phthalo and our bright red. That's going to keep it a really limited paint palette. Now, when it comes to things like violet and magenta, you can get all sorts of different colors, a very vast variety. And the person on your right might like the color in the middle, and the person on your left might like the color on the right. And the next person might like a different violet. That's your decision. Once you have a palette and you've played around with it, it'll be then your decision to decide what colors you want to continue with, which colors you like and which colors you don't like. But that's for you to play with. All right, let's get to our color wheel. We're going to be using primary yellow, phthalo blue, bright red, and titanium white, all in acrylic colors. Acrylic dry quickly. It's going to be really nice for us. The first thing you need to do is take your red, load your paintbrush by kind of getting a lot onto your paintbrush, and then we're going to paint over the R on our red mark. When you have a color that isn't mixed with anything else, that is a hue. So our red, violet, blue, green, white, and orange are all going to be hues. When we add white to it, that's going to be creating a tint. We're going to be picking up our white using a palette knife because we don't want to contaminate our puddle of white. If I was to pick up with my paintbrush, I would get red into that white whenever I picked it up. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. I'm going to pick up some of that red. Then I'm going to mix it in with that white. Whenever I do this, I keep it from contaminating my paintbrush as well. If I was to use something like this and I was just to pick up some white and pick up some red and I was to mix them in like this and I was just to keep mixing and keep mixing, that's fine, except for you wind up getting some pure red and some pure white higher on your bristles, even though I've already mixed it in. And you can see here, it's well mixed in. I still have some pure red and pure white on my bristles. So when I go to paint, I might get pure magenta or pink, or I might get some streaks in my paint. And that's what I don't want. That's why we use a palette knife, so that it keeps everything nice and clean. So now that I have a color pretty well mixed here using my palette knife, I'm going to pick up that color, load my paintbrush with that color, and I'm going to lay that down right here underneath the R. This is a tint of red. Because I've added white, that means I've created a tint of this red. I'm going to do this a second time, not picking up any more red. I'm just going to use the same pink that's already on my paintbrush. I'm going to mix that in. Then I'm going to load my paintbrush with that color and paint right underneath that tint. I'm going to wash off my paintbrush in the solid cup. The solid cup is going to be our dirty cup. It's going to have dirty water in it. I always want to wash it off really good in this cup. Then our clear cup will be our clean cup. So after I've washed it off in my dirty cup, I'll wash it off in my clear cup. I will gently wipe it off onto a paper towel. I'm not pulling the bristles. If you're pulling the bristles or mashing it down, that's going to hurt your bristles and change the shape of it. I want to very softly keep this to a nice pointed shape. So I'm turning it on my side and I'm very softly drying that off. The next thing I want to do to my red hue is put a shade of red there. The way I'm going to create a shade is I'm first going to wipe off my palette knife and I'm going to pick up some red. I'm going to get quite a bit of red, and then I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. I'm going to pick up a nice glob of blue, and then I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. I'm going to put it right there. Then I'm going to mix this in really well, and it's going to create a really dark color that's close to black. It won't be black. However, the reason we're not using black is because we don't know how black is going to mix with these colors. We don't know what's in our black. We don't know if it's a cool black or if it's a warm black. And also, if you want a subtle difference in your hues, you need to mix this way so that it's not a dramatic jump. Black has its place, and it can look nice in some paintings. However, whenever you have a good mixed black, that sometimes works better with an artwork. So we're going to practice with that. I'm going to need a little bit more red in mine. If yours is too green, you need to add more red and blue. If yours is too blue, you need to add a little bit more yellow and red. And if yours is too red, then you'll add the yellow and blue. Simple as that. All we're going for is a really, really dark color. That's our main goal. Then I'm going to pick up some red, and I'm going to set it right next to that dark color that I just mixed. So now that I have red next to that dark color, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that dark color, and I'm going to mix it into that red. That's going to create a dark red. That is going to be a shade of red. So then I'm going to paint that shade just above the red. Next, I'm going to add a little bit more of that dark color off to the side. I'm going to load my paintbrush with that. I'm going to paint above that. That's our red. Next, we're going to be painting in the blue. I need to wash off my paintbrush in the dirty water, then wash off my paintbrush in the clean water, and then I'm going to dry it off softly and paint the bee with a blue. Now that I have the blue painted, I'm going to wipe off my palette knife, make sure that it's clean. I'm going to pick up some white. I'm gonna put 2 dots of white next to my blue. And then I'm gonna use my palette knife to pick up some blue and put it in that white. I'm gonna mix that in. And then that is a tint of my blue. So I'm gonna load my paintbrush with that. I'm gonna paint just under that blue. I have a tint of blue. The next thing I want to do is add the rest of that white, that second daub, onto my paintbrush. And I'll paint just below that. So now I have 2 tints of blue. Then I'll wash off my paintbrush in the dirty water. And then I'll wash my paintbrush off in the clean water. The next thing I need to do is to create a shade of blue. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use that dark color that we've already mixed. I'm going to use that dark color and I'm going to add just pure blue. So I'm going to take this blue over there and then I'm going to mix in some of that dark color to the blue. And that's going to create a very, very dark blue. I'll paint this shade of blue above the first blue. And then I'll attempt to make a darker blue by adding more of that dark color to my blue.
Now I'm done with the blue. I'm going to wash off my paintbrush in the dirty water, wash off my paintbrush in the clean water, then very softly dry it off.
Next is to paint the yellow. I need to make sure that my brush is nice and dry. I'm going to load my paintbrush with the yellow. I'm going to paint over that Y. Once I have the white completely painted in, just like the other two, I'm going to take that white and I'm going to put 2 daubs of white next to my yellow, and I'm going to create 2 tints of yellow. So I'll take 1 and 2, and then I'm going to wipe off my palette knife, get some yellow, and mix that in. I'm going to load my paintbrush with that white and yellow mixed. I'm going to create a tint of yellow, and you can see how bright it is. Then I'm going to load the rest of that white onto my paintbrush and lay down that color as well, that tint of yellow. Wash off my paintbrush, and then we're going to create a shade of yellow. The way we're going to create the shade of yellow is the same way as the others. I'm going to put yellow next to my dark color. Now, it's important to know that yellow is a weak color. It's not a strong color. So we're going to use less dark this time. We're just going to use the smallest a little amount possible. I'm going to mix it into that yellow. And it's going to change that yellow into a dark yellow. If it's too dark, you might need to make a separate daub of yellow. I can see mine's pretty dark there. And so I'm going to put a second little yellow here, and I'm going to grab some of this color and mix it into that. Now I have 2 different shades of yellow. One of them more of a mustard yellow, and one just slightly darker than our first yellow. Now it's time to create our orange. To create orange, I'm going to pick up a lot of yellow. I'm going to put it over here to the side. Then I'm going to take just a little bit of red, make sure my palette knife is clean. Take just a little bit of red, not much at all. And I'm going to mix that in to the yellow. And I can already see I put too much red. It's pretty dark orange, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it. Once I have my orange, I'm going to paint over that O, And I'm going to do the same thing that I've done with all the others. I'm going to add some white to create a tint, and I'm going to add some dark color to create a shade. Now, when creating a shade of my orange, I'm going to add just a little bit more red. So I'm going to wash off my paintbrush, I'm going to get a little bit more red, and I'm going to get some of that dark color, and I'm going to create a shade of my orange. Now we're going to move on to our green. And so to make green, we're going to mix our yellow with our blue. I'm going to take a lot of yellow because yellow is a weak color. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of blue. It doesn't take much blue at all to create a green. So a lot of yellow, just a little bit of blue to create our green.
So make sure that my paintbrush is nice and clean. I can see that I left a couple streaks, so I'm going to clean my paintbrush off one more time before I paint that green.
Now that I have my green, I'm going to create a tint of green the same way that I've created all the others. I'm going to put 2 little dots of white, and then I'm going to mix in the green with that white. I'm going to paint the tint just below that green. White is a little bit more opaque than most colors, so you can see how it really shows up just a little bit better once I add that white. I'm going to make this green darker the same way that I've made everything else darker, except for I'm going to add a little bit more blue this time. And so with green, I want to push it to the cool side. I'm going to add a little bit of blue and a little bit of that dark color that I started with. I'm going to mix that in. To create a shade of that green, I'm now going to paint on this color here. If your water is getting dirty and your clean water is getting dirty, you need to pour it out and start over. Get clean water. Now that I'm done with green, our next color that we're going to do is violet. For violet, I'm going to pick up equal amounts of red and blue, and hopefully that gives me a decent violet. I might need to add more red. We'll see.
So mix in the red and the blue. And it does need more red to create a violet.
I can see that this got really dark really fast. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this. I'm going to put a generous amount of red next to it. I'm just going to mix in a little bit of that with a lot of red. With these particular colors, I suppose it needed more red than it did blue. This will really wind up looking nicer once we add the white to it. It'll really start to pop. However, this is going to be our violet. True violet might be quite a bit more pink than this, a little bit as if we added some white, maybe a little bit more magenta. But with these colors that we have, this is the best we could get. I'm going to add a tint using the same method that I used for all of the others. I'm going to add 2 little dots of white next to it. and I'm going to mix in that magenta or that violet color, and that's going to help us to create a tint of this. Next, I'm going to create a shade of this violet by simply adding more blue and a little bit of that dark color that I have there. This is where we're going to stop for today. Whenever you're ready and you're at a stopping point and you have this done, I need you to do your best to wash out your paintbrush, and then you're going to take your palette knife and we're going to scrape it off any extras we have. We're going to scrape off into the trash can. You're going to hand me your palette knife. You're going to hand me your paintbrush. You're going to wash your own palette. So you have to wash your palette. I will wash your paintbrush and I will wash your palette knife. Then once everyone's done at your table, we'll take both of our cups to the sink and set it right next to the sink, and I'll pour them out later.